Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. Adapted by Cathy Dubowski. Chapter 1. My First Home. The first place I can remember was a large, pleasant meadow. I lived on my mother's milk, as I could not yet eat grass. In the daytime, I ran by her side. At night, I lay close beside her. When it was hot, we stood in the shade of the trees. When it was cold, we slept in a warm shed near the master's house. We were very fond of our master, Farmer Gray. He called my mother Duchess, and I think she was his favorite. He was a good, kind man, so we were well off. When I was old enough to eat grass, my mother went to work in the daytime, but she always came home at night. There were 6 other young colts in the meadow. They were all older than I. Oh, how I loved to run with them! But sometimes they would bite and kick. One day my mother told me, "The colts who live here are good colts, but they have not learned good manners. You come from a fine family. Your father has a good name in these parts. And I think you have never seen me bite or kick. So I hope you will grow up gentle and well-mannered. Do your work with a good will and never learn bad ways." I never forgot my mother's words, for I knew she had seen many things. One day we heard the sharp cry of dogs. "They have found the hare," said my mother. "Now we shall see the hunt." A pack of howling dogs chased a frightened hare across the fields. Many men followed on horseback. The hare tried to get through our fence, but it was too late. The dogs were upon her. One of the men rode up and whipped off the dogs. He held the hare up by the leg. She was torn and bleeding. All the gentlemen seemed pleased. I did not know what to think. Then there was a shout down by the brook. 2 horses had fallen and thrown their riders. One man seemed all right, but the other man lay quite still. "His neck is broken," said my mother. The man ran to his side. I heard someone say it was Squire Gordon's only son. Young Gordon's black horse lay moaning on the grass. A horse doctor came to look at him. He shook his head. "One of his legs is broken." I saw a gun flash in the sunlight. There was a loud bang and an awful shriek. Then all was still. The black horse moved no more. My mother seemed very sad. "The black horse's name was Rob Roy," she said. "He was a fine, bold horse whom she had known for years." She never went to that part of the meadow again. A few days later, we heard the church bell ringing. They were taking young Gordon to the churchyard to bury him. I never knew what they did with Rob Roy, but it was all for one little hare. Chapter 2. My Breaking In. In time, I grew quite handsome. My coat was bright black, and I had one white foot and a pretty white star on my forehead. When I turned 4, my master said it was time to break me in. He would trust no one else to do it. To break in means to teach a horse to wear a saddle and bridle and to carry a rider or to pull a carriage. The horse must always do his master's will, even when he is tired or hungry. So you see, this breaking in is a great thing. First, my master gave me some oats. He talked gently to me and patted me. Then he got the bit into my mouth. Oh, it was a nasty thing. You cannot think how bad it felt. But I knew my mother always wore one when she went out, so I took it in good spirit. Next came the saddle. It was not so bad. Then I had a few more oats and a little walk. This we did every morning. Then, one day, my master got on my back and rode me round the meadow. How strange it felt! But I was proud to carry my master. The next day, the blacksmith nailed a curved piece of iron to each of my hoofs. My master called these horseshoes. They made my feet feel stiff and heavy, but in time I got used to them. Then came the harness. A stiff, heavy collar went round my neck, and the bridle held leather pieces called blinkers against my eyes. I could see only straight ahead. Next was the saddle, with a nasty, stiff strap under my tail. That was the crupper. I never felt more like kicking, but of course I could not kick such a good master. After that, I often went out in double harness with my mother. With her, it was easy to learn how best to go. One day she told me, "There are many kinds of men in the world. Some are good and kind like our master, but others are bad and cruel. A horse never knows who may buy him, so I do not know where you will go. But I hope you will always do your best and keep up your good name." I did not know it then, but I was soon to leave my first home. Chapter 3. Beardwick Park. Squire Gordon bought me and took me to Beardwick Park. It was a pretty place with a large house and gardens. The stables had room for many horses and carriages. I was put into a nice loose box with clean sweet hay. In a loose box, the horse is not tied up, but is left free to do as he likes. It is a great thing to have a loose box. In the stall next to mine stood a fat grey pony. "How do you do?" I said. "What is your name?" The pony turned round as far as he could. His was not a loose box, for he was tied up. "My name is Merrylegs," he said. "I carry the young ladies on my back. Are you going to live next door to me? I hope you have a nice temper." Just then a chestnut mare looked over at us. She was tied too. Her ears were laid back and her eyes flashed. "So, it is you who have turned me out of my box." "I have turned no one out," I said. "The man who bought me put me here." But she just turned away. Later, when the mare went out, Merrylegs told me, "Her name is Ginger. She bites. One day she bit James Howard, our stable boy, in the arm, and now the young ladies are afraid to come in here. I miss them very much. Maybe they will come again now, if you do not bite or snap." "I never bite anything but grass, hay and oats," I said. "I cannot think why Ginger does." "It is just a bad habit," said Merrylegs. "But John Manley, our groom, does all he can to please her, and James is as kind as can be. So it is Ginger's own fault she did not stay in that box." The next day John Manley brought me round for Squire Gordon to try. I remembered my mother's words, and I tried my best to please him. "How do you like him?" Mrs. Gordon asked when we came home. "He is the most pleasant horse I have ever ridden," said the squire. "What shall we call him?" They thought of some names. Ebony, Blackbird, but those would not do. Then Mrs. Gordon said, "He is such a beauty, with his black coat and sweet face. What do you say to Black Beauty?" "Why, yes, this is just the name." John told James to call me Black Beauty. I might have named him Rob Roy, said James, "for I never saw two horses more alike." "That's no wonder," said John. "Didn't you know? Farmer Gray's Duchess was the mother of them both." "So, poor Rob Roy, killed at the hunt, was my brother. No wonder my mother was so sad that day. It seems horses have no family, at least not after they are sold." Chapter 4. Ginger's Story. A few days later, I went out in the carriage with Ginger. I was surprised at how hard she worked. John never had to use the whip with us, and our paces were much the same. On Sundays we were turned out into the orchard. What fun it was to run and roll in the soft grass. One quiet afternoon I told Ginger about my upbringing. "My life has been so different," she said sadly. "No one was ever kind to me. My breaking in was an awful time. Several men grabbed me and forced the bit into my mouth. They whipped me and dragged me around. They never once gave me the chance to know what they wanted. Then I was sold to a gentleman in London. He used the bearing rein to make me look fancy. I hated it worse than anything. Oh, I like to hold my head up as high as any horse, but a bearing rein makes you keep it up for hours at a time. I wanted to please my master, but the bearing rein made me angry. To feel such pain just for the love of fashion. One day I could stand it no more. The rein was just too tight. I kicked as hard as I could, till I broke free. My master sold me. After that I changed hands many times, but it was always the same. Each new master used the bearing rein, and each groom was meaner than the last. I made up my mind that men were my enemies. Of course, it is different here, said Ginger, but who knows how long it will last. I was sorry for Ginger, but I knew very little then. I thought she made things out to be worse than they really were. Then, as the weeks went by, we became good friends. Ginger seemed happier, and her temper grew sweet. Our lives at Squire Gordon's were very happy indeed. I do believe that mare is getting fond of me, said James one day. She'll be as good as Black Beauty soon, said John. Kindness is all she wants, poor thing. Chapter 5. A Stormy Day. One day, my master had a trip to make on business. John put me to the light cart, and we were on our way. It had rained for days, and the wind was brisk. We rode along at a good pace, till we came to a small wooden bridge. "The river is rising fast," the toll-keeper called out as we started to cross the bridge. "I fear it will be a bad night." Soon we reached the town. The master's business took a long time, and it was late when we started for home. The wind was blowing harder now. The trees creaked and swayed, and leaves swirled round us as we quickened our pace. It was nearly dark when we came to the bridge. As soon as my feet touched the wood, I knew something was wrong. I came to a dead stop. "Go on, Beauty," said my master. He gave me a light touch with the whip, but I dared not go. John got down and tried to lead me across. "Come on, Beauty. What's the matter?" Of course I could not tell him, but I felt sure the bridge was not safe. Just then the toll-keeper ran out of the house on the other side of the bridge. "Stop! The bridge is broken. If you cross, you will surely fall into the river." "Thank God," said my master. "That's my Beauty," said John with pride. We had to take a longer way home. Mrs. Gordon met us on the front steps. "Is everything all right, my dear?" she asked fearfully. "Yes," said my master, "but only because your black beauty is wiser than we are. He kept us out of the river tonight. What a good supper they gave me that evening, and such a thick bed of straw. There could be no better place than this, I thought, and I fell asleep feeling lucky indeed." Chapter 6. The Fire. A few weeks later, the master and mistress went to visit friends. James drove, for he was soon to go to a new place to work and needed the practice. It was a long drive, so we had to stop for the night at a hotel. Ginger and I were left in the stable. I cannot say how long I slept. When I woke up, it was still dark. I could hear Ginger coughing. I heard another sound too, a crackling sound. Above us flickered a strange red light. I did not know what it was, but it made me afraid. The other horses woke up too. They pulled at their halters and they stamped the floor. Danger seemed all around us. Outside, I heard someone yell, "Fire!" A young stable boy burst in with a lantern. His hands shook as he untied the horses. He tried to lead them out, but they would not move. He was in such a hurry and seemed so scared himself. How could we trust him? He tried to drag me out by force, but that only frightened me more. Then I heard James's voice, as sweet and cheery as always. "Come, Beauty, come with me." He tied his scarf round my eyes. I could see nothing. There was only his calm voice, only his gentle hands upon my neck. I let him lead me into the yard. Then he slipped the scarf from my eyes and said, "Here, somebody! Hold this horse while I go back for the other." I let out a shrill whine when I saw him run back into the burning stable. By now the hotel was in an uproar. People in nightgowns shouting and running. Frightened horses and carriages jammed into the yard. My master pushed through the crowd. He shouted toward the stable, "James, are you in there?" There was no answer, only a loud crash. Then James ran out through the smoke, and he had Ginger with him. "My brave James!" cried the master. Ginger told me I had helped save her. When I heard your whinny, I was no longer afraid to come out. The whole stable was in flames as the fire engines clattered into the yard. James led us away from the smoke and the noise, but we could still hear the terrible shrieks of the horses trapped inside. Chapter 7. Going for the doctor. "Well, James," John said when we were home again, "guess who is going to take your place when you leave? Little Joe Green." "Little Joe Green!" cried James. "He is just a child." "He is 14 and a half, said John. "I was just as old when my parents died and the master took me in, so I'm not one to turn up his nose at a little boy." Soon after James left, the stable bell woke me in the middle of the night. John came in, calling, "Wake up, Beauty. You must do your best. Tonight we ride for our mistress's life." The air was frosty, the moon was bright. For 8 miles I ran like the wind. At last we came to the town. All was quiet but for the clatter of my feet upon the stones. The church clock struck 3 as we came to the doctor's door. John rang the bell twice, and he knocked at the door like thunder. An upstairs window flew open. The doctor was in his nightcap. "What do you want?" he called down. "Mrs. Gordon is ill, sir," called John. "Master says you must come, or she will surely die." The doctor was soon at the front door. "My son has taken my horse," he said. "May I have yours?" John stroked my neck. I was very hot. "He has come at a gallop all the way, sir," said John, "but I guess there is no other way." The doctor was not a good rider, but I ran my best. At last we were at Squire Gordon's front steps. The doctor followed my master into the house. Little Joe Green was left to lead me to the stable. I was glad to be home. My legs shook under me, and I was steamed and covered with sweat. Joe rubbed me down, but he did not put my warm blanket on me as he should have. He must have thought I was too hot. Then he gave me a pail full of cold water. John would have given me something warm to drink, but I was so thirsty I drank it all. After that, Joe gave me some hay and corn, and thinking he had done right, he went away. Soon I turned deadly cold. I began to shake, and I wished for my warm, thick blanket. I wished for John too, but he had 8 miles to walk back from the doctor's house. So I lay down and tried to sleep. After a long time I heard John at the door. I gave a low moan, for I was in great pain. In a moment he was at my side. He seemed to know just how I felt. He covered me with blankets and made warm gruel for me to drink. "Stupid boy," I heard him say to himself. I do not know how long I was ill, but I thought I might die. I believe they all thought so too. My master came to see me every day. "Poor beauty," he said, "do you know you saved your mistress's life?" How glad I was to hear that. One night John was giving me some medicine when Joe's father, Thomas, stopped by. "I wish you'd say a kind word to Joe," said Thomas. "He knows this was all his fault, but he is not a bad boy." For a moment John did not speak. Then he said, "That horse is the pride of my heart. To think that his life might be lost like this. Still, I will try to give the boy a good word." "Well, thank you," said Thomas. "I am glad you see that it was only ignorance." John's voice startled me as he shouted, "Only ignorance? Why, ignorance is the worst thing in the world next to wickedness. People say, 'Oh, I did not know any better. I did not mean any harm.' They think that makes it all right." I heard no more, for the medicine sent me to sleep. In the morning I felt much better, but I often thought of John's words when I came to know more of the world. Chapter 8. The Parting. I had now lived in this happy place 3 years. John had turned little Joe Green into a fine young stable boy. Ginger and I were the best of friends. But sad changes were coming. Mrs. Gordon was often ill. The master lost his ready smile. Then we learned our mistress must move to a warmer country. The news fell upon us like the ringing of a death bell. John went about his work without a word. Joe's whistle disappeared. Dear Merrylegs was given to the vicar, who hired John to be his groom. Ginger and I were sold to an earl who was an old friend of the master's. He thought we should have a good home there. On the last day, we drove our master and mistress to the train. "Goodbye, John," Mrs. Gordon said. "God bless you." John made no answer. Perhaps he could not speak. And poor Joe, he stood close by our heads to hide his tears. The train puffed into the station, and our master carried the mistress on board. Then the doors slammed shut, and the train pulled away. We watched till there was nothing but a trail of thin white smoke. "We shall never see her again," said John as he drove us slowly home. But of course, it was not our home now. The next morning, Ginger and I were taken to Ursula Park. "There are no better horses anywhere," John told the groom, Mr. York. "But I must tell you, we never used the bearing rein with either of them." "Well," said York, "they must wear the bearing rein here. I prefer the loose rein myself, and his lordship does not mind. But my lady insists on the latest style. The rein must be tight when she rides." John shook his head. "I am sorry to hear that." His goodbye to us was quick, and then he was gone. I never saw him again. Chapter 9. Ursula Park. I had a new home, a new master, and a new name. The Earl wished to call me Baron. The very next afternoon, Ginger and I were put to the carriage. As the clock struck 3, we were led to the front of the house. Soon we heard the rustle of silk as my new mistress came down the steps. She looked at us and did not seem pleased, but she said nothing and got in. This was my first time wearing the bearing rein. I could not put my head down when I wanted, and I did not care for that. But it did not pull my head higher than I always carried it, so I did not mind too much. The next day at 3, we were again at the door. We heard the silk dress rustle. "York," cried my mistress, "put those horses' heads higher. They are not fit to be seen." York shortened the rein. Now I began to understand why Ginger hated it. That day we went up a steep hill. I had to pull with my head held high. How it strained my back and legs. Each day York tightened the reins. I began to dread going out. Then one day my lady came down late, and the silk rustled more than ever. "York!" she cried. "Are you never going to get those horses' heads up? Raise them at once." York came to me first. He pulled the reins so tight the bit cut my mouth. Then he turned to Ginger. She knew what was coming, so she began to kick with all her might. Suddenly she tripped over the carriage pole and fell down. York held her head to the ground till they could set me free. They gave Ginger to the Earl's son for hunting. She never went out with me again. I cannot put into words the pain I knew for the next 4 months. I always came home tired and in poor spirits. In my old home, I always knew that John and my master were my friends. But here, I had no friends. Chapter 10. Ruben Smith. In the spring, York drove the Earl and his family to London. He left a man named Ruben Smith in charge. I think everyone liked Smith. I know the horses did. But he had one great fault, the love of drink. One day Smith rode me to town on business and left me in a stable. It was dark when he came back, and he was in a very bad temper. "Hurry up!" he shouted at the stableman who brought me out. "Oh, look!" said the stableman. "Your horse has a loose nail in his front shoe. Shall I fix it before you go?" "No," cried Smith. "I haven't got time. It'll be all right till we get home." I thought it unlike him to not see about the shoe. "Take care then," said the stableman as Smith climbed on my back. Smith answered with a curse, and we galloped off into the dark night. I went at my full speed, but still he whipped me. It was dark, the roads were stony, and my shoe grew looser with each step. Finally, it flew off. Smith should have known something was wrong, but he did not stop. That's when I knew he must be drunk, too drunk to care. Soon my hoof was split to the quick. The pain was too much to bear, and I fell hard upon both knees. Smith was thrown to the ground. After a few minutes, I got to my feet. Smith was lying by the road. He did not move. It must have been midnight when I heard a horse's hoofs. Then I heard Ginger and men's voices. "It's Ruben Smith!" cried one. "He's dead!" "Why, the horse has thrown him!" said another. "Who'd have thought the black horse would do that?" Then they saw that I was hurt. "Look," said one, "his hoof is cut all to pieces. No wonder he fell. And look at his knees. Ruben must have been drunk to ride a horse over these stones without a shoe." I shall never forget that painful walk home. It was more than 3 miles. At last I was led into my own box, and my knees were cleaned and wrapped in wet cloths. Then I lay down and tried to sleep. The next day the horse doctor came to see me. "The horse is not spoiled for work," he said, "but he will never lose the scars on his knees." I was turned into a small meadow to hill. I felt so free, and the grass was sweet, but I was very lonely. One morning the gate opened, and in trotted dear old Ginger. We were so happy to see each other, but she had sad news to tell. The earth sun had ridden her too hard. Her strength was gone, and her back was badly strained. "So here we are, ruined in our youth," said Ginger. "You by a drunkard, and I by a fool." Soon the Earl came back from London. He was very angry when he saw us. "What a waste," he said to York. "The mare shall have a year's rest, but the black one must be sold. I will not have knees like that in my stables." A week later, I was put on a train and sent away. Hi, and thank you for listening. This video is only a preview. If you enjoyed it, you can choose to support this channel with a symbolic price on Patreon. In return, you will get access to the full versions of my audiobooks, sneak peeks, and, depending on your choice, to many other benefits. Check out my Valecan Voice Patreon page, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.